the times of your life. And very good evening, everyone. It's Jerry and James, two homies who are Australians. And I apologize, there seems to be a little bit of a problem on the sound here. Hopefully, it will improve as we go through this. But anyway, I wanted to make a short introduction. Basically, what we're going to talk about tonight is your life in China based on the tweet that you put out. So, first of all, let's explain to everyone why you call yourself the Commie Pommy, and then we'll talk about this fantastic extended tweet that you put out. So, James, over to you. Why are you the Commie Pommy?
Oh, thanks, Jerry. Good to be here, and hello to everyone watching as well. Commie Pommy, well, it wasn't something that took too long to come about. It was just a spur of the moment decision. But I'll give you a brief introduction anyway. I'm originally from England, and I moved to Australia when I was young with the entire family. I did my schooling there and education, and spent a significant portion of my life working there. Mm-hmm. And I'd always had an interest in Asia, so I decided I wanted to come over. I'll get more into that a little later. Commie Pommy essentially came about because I have a connection with China through my wife, who was Chinese born, and I'm from the UK. And most may not be aware, unless they come from Australia or they have a significant connection with Australia, that Pommy actually means, well, that's actually debatable, but they use the term Pommy to refer to someone who's from England and has emigrated or moved to Australia. And when I was packing up to move to China this time, a lot of my friends actually said, "Oh, you're going to become a commie." And they were saying it jokingly, and I didn't take it to heart. And I just put the two together. I thought, well, I get called a Pommy there, I'm going to get called a commie here, so why not call myself a Commie Pommy? That's how it came about.
Let me just interrupt you here. We have a problem. Someone else has come up with this. The sound is bad out there as well. It's very difficult to hear what you're saying. Maybe it's just moving the microphone around. If you have a microphone that you can, a disconnectable, connectable microphone or earphones might help. But it seems that it's really difficult at the moment to hear you.
It could actually be the internet connection here. I tested it earlier, and everything seemed okay. But
yeah.
Now I'm just
when you're not speaking, there's no background noise. As soon as you start to speak, there's a lot of crackling. So someone is saying Jerry is clear, but James is not. So yeah, we do have a problem. What I might do, I might end this broadcast and then create another one to start immediately. Is that okay with you?
That's fine. Yeah. Just quickly, is there any difference now? Because there was some software open which I've closed.
Yes, you fixed it.
Is that better? Okay.
That's 100% better.
I just realized I had this piece of software running, and I'm just, that should be there. So gone. Yeah. Hopefully that's better for everyone.
You have a tiny little echo in the background, but we can live with that much better than we could live with what we had before.
Okay. Yeah. My apologies. My apologies.
Okay. So there you go. Is evidence that it's better. Sounds great. So, okay. So, again, I knew what you were talking about with the Pommy bit. Why do people in Australia call you and me Pommies?
Why do they call Pommy? So that the actual audio is breaking up there, so I had a little bit of trouble hearing the last part.
Okay, why do people in Australia call you and I Pommies? Why is that?
It's interesting. I've had this conversation with many of an Australian, and they believe it means prisoner of Mother England, which, if you actually step back and had a look at it logically, it wouldn't make sense because we've come from the UK. So technically, were we prisoners or weren't we prisoners? Were the ancestors in Australia prisoners? I don't know. But I also read a few articles that actually stated that the actual origins was from the word pomegranate, meaning the color of our skin. Now, I don't know whether that's true, but the origins, I'm unsure. So I actually have there's two avenues there. But yeah, I copped that all through school, Pommy. You know, they would add some colorful words at the end, but it was all just for fun.
I copped it a lot when I started living in Australia. I was much older. I was 28 when I went to live in Australia, and my kids were only 5 and 3, so they didn't get it very much. The younger kids don't get it. But at work, I got a lot of that. The Great Unwashed and those kinds of names. So, okay, yeah. So that explains the Pommy part. What about the commie part?
Commie, well, it's interesting because I've got a couple of very close friends in Australia who, let's just say, they don't have a very good opinion of China. For, you know, a lot of people don't as well, but they pretty much just said, you're going to become a communist, and they just shortened it to commie, which most of us would have heard anyway, especially back in the days with the USSR and everything like that. You're a commie. And yeah, they were just saying it as a joke, and that's where it comes from, the fact that I've moved to China. So they were calling me a commie, and that, again, that was just in fun, and I don't mind. I thought it was funny. So
fair enough. The Australians always have a great thing of shortening everything. I mean, my proper name is Jeremy, but I call myself Jerry. Everybody knows me as Jerry, but in Australia, I'm always known as Jer. They shorten everything.
I've never heard Jer before, I must say.
Jer or Jez or Jezza. I mean, it's
Jezza, yeah, Jerry.
Jezza is very common. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to this thing. You and I have quite a lot in common. I'm sure we're going to touch on some issues that we have in common, or some things that we have in common, because we both got a British background, we both got Australian background, I think we both can say that we love living in China, especially, yes. I know I can, and having read your Twitter the other day, I can pretty much say you feel the same as me. But let's go back to your childhood. You said you were drawn to China since childhood.
Yes.
Why were you drawn, or what drew you to China?
To be honest, I don't really know. When I was young, I always had a fascination with the Great Wall of China, and that was in the primary school when I was in the UK. They had pictures of it on the wall, and I remember that distinctly. And I thought to myself, I just liked it. I thought that's amazing. And I was only young. I mean, I was probably 9 at the time. And back in the UK, Monkey was on TV as well. Granted, that was a Japanese show, but it was based on a Chinese folktale. And I was enthralled by it. I loved it. And in addition to that, I also had I loved Bruce Lee as well back in the day. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it was probably more Asia in general, but more directed towards China.
Yeah, I'm a little older than you, and we had the David Carradine TV series called Kung Fu. Are you familiar with that one?
I watched that as well. Well, my parents did.
Same generation, I'm pretty sure. How old are your parents? I just turned 65, so there you go. So,
well, my dad is almost 10 years your senior, and my mum just turned 81. So,
all right, yeah, bit of difference, bit of difference. So, you said you were drawn to China from your childhood,
yes,
but then you also said you didn't really want to come here because you had these misperceptions or perceptions of China that it might be not what you wanted.
Yeah, see, I always wanted to go to China. So years ago, I always wanted to go to China.
Right.
And previous life, previous partners in the past when I was young were never really interested in it either. And the opportunity that ended up coming up for me, or the first time I went overseas, other than going from the UK to Australia, was when I went to Japan, and I lived there for a year.
Right.
And that was back in 2004 to 2005. And prior to making that decision, I was always considering China or thinking about China, but I never made that step, never made the decision. And it was always in the back of my mind, because I heard the way people would talk to Chinese people in Australia when I was going through school, and they weren't very nice to the Chinese population at the time. And I mean, that went on for a long time. And I was also told by people when I was much older that China's not a very good place to go. Having said that, though, I had family members say that the UK wasn't great either. That's why we left. So I never actually went back to the UK until 5 years ago, and I went back for the first time in my life. And I absolutely loved it. So it was bizarre. It's just these things that have been put into my head, and they just carried on into adulthood. And I never made that conscious decision because one, I had a fear to come to China. I didn't know the country. I always had misconceptions of what China was about. I thought that they had bad air quality. People would say the Chinese people are rude. They spit everywhere, and all these other things that they would always say. Oh, and there's police patrolling everywhere. They'd always bring up Tiananmen Square and child slavery, racism towards Westerners, and a whole gamut of different reasons. And it stayed in my head. And I guess that's probably how a lot of Australians or a lot of Westerners feel now, who have never been there and have only got the media or stories online to go about, I guess.
I actually feel a little sorry for people, and I'm quite polite most of the time on Twitter when I get these people jumping down my throat and say, well, what's your experience in China, or how come you feel so different to me? The fact is, most of them have never been to China. They just base this on media, and I think you and I can prove on a daily basis that media is misinforming them. And that's the thing that I find. It's the worries and the misconceptions. And you talked about, the weather can be a bit grueling at times. Right now, we're going through torrential rain, very high humidity. It's 32, 33 degrees centigrade every day. It's hot, humid, it's uncomfortable.
Same as here.
Yeah, okay, so you've got the same sort of thing. The weather can be. What about this rudeness? You said that you had the perception that people were rude.
Yes.
I also had the same perception, and I had it for the first few years that I was here, until I started noticing that they aren't actually rude. They're just different. What do you think about that? They are different.
And I believe it's to do, and I may be wrong with this, but I've had endless discussions with my wife about it, and she even had troubles too when we first came back to China, which was together as a couple. I mean, back in 1819, we came back here, and she even felt the same way. She struggled with it here, but then after discussing it and thinking about it, I think it's a difference in language. Whereas Chinese language can be more direct, not necessarily in a rude way, but more direct, not necessarily to the point either, but it's just the direct translation from Chinese to English seems to be abrupt. And in addition to that, there's a very large population here, and even in the cities, there's a large population. And we always struggled with customer service. We always thought, oh, they're just rude, like, oh yeah, tap, go out, that kind of thing. But that didn't happen everywhere, and we put it down to the fact that if they were the same as in the West, and they spent the time saying, how's your day? Oh, what have you done? Or did you watch the footy last night? Or blah, 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 blah. They would probably not get through the queue that's waiting behind me to be served as well. So I don't know. There's a whole...
I can remember a great story when my mother came to visit in Australia, and we were going through one of the supermarkets, I think it was Coles, and we got to the front of the checkout, and the girl on the checkout chick, as they call them, said to my mother, "How are you today?" And of course, she's British, So she said, well, as a matter of fact, I've got a bit of a bad back because I was on the plane for 22 hours yesterday. And she started to us, Mum, she's not interested in how you are. Can you just get the stuff across here?
Just go.
Yeah, because in Australia they do. How are you today? No one cares. It's just the same as hello. They don't want an answer from you. And it is culturally different. My mum fell into that trap. And here they don't even say it, just ni hao, yao dai zi ma. You want a bag with that or something like that.
And that's
it's really, they won't even look at you as well. If you go to the counter, they're not even looking at you, but they're talking to you. So it is culturally different. And yeah, so this is most Chinese don't do small talk. And this is also true too. I think it's this one. Let me get this one up. There you go. Difference is the unknown. Many people are afraid of the unknown. Have you ever had that experience where you walk into a place and everyone appears to be hostile?
Yes.
What happened?
I don't know. I think just back to what you said before about the differences, I think that's exactly what it is. It's a difference in culture and a different in ways, and a lot of people see that through their own cultural lens and see it as if it's a problem, but it's a difference. It's just a difference. But yes, that has happened to me here. So I'd walk, previous in 2018, 2019, I was living in Sanming, which is a small city, about 3.5 hours drive inland from Fuzhou here in Fujian. And it's a very traditional city. There were only 5 actual Westerners per se, apart from some students elsewhere. And I would get that walking down the street. I would get people just walking past me, and they would be like, and just stop and be like, and then they would be like, and they would talk to slap someone else in the arm and go, and I thought, what's going on here? They seem to be angry, but it did take me a while to learn that that's actually the way they talk here with their dialect. They tend to shout and they get very excited. And they're curious as well, very curious, and they just want to interact. And sometimes that can be a bit like, whoa, especially.
Yeah, Cantonese are a little like that too. Where they say "fan lama," what? They're just asking, "Have you eaten yet?" "Fan lama." Whoa, what did I do? But the thing that struck me, especially traveling through China, and you've been in a city that's many hours from the bigger cities, so you're in a 4th or even untiered city, and you find that when you go into these villages in the countryside, and literally they've never seen a foreigner before. It's like, in the cowboy movies when the stranger walks through the swing doors and the piano player stops and the barman stops wiping his glass. Yeah, and everybody stares, and then but it appears hostile. And then suddenly you smile at them and you say, "Ni men hao," and they "Oh, hey, ni men hao, hey, what's your Zhongwen?" And they're off. That's fine. Everything is fine. So
I had that.
But this is what you should avoid doing: walking into bars that are owned by the triads in Hong Kong. Okay, now I wanted to move on to you came to China, first of all, for a 12-month stint, and then you went back. Can I make the assumption when you came here for 12 months, you were not married?
I was not.
You were not. Okay. And so when you went back and you made this decision you wanted to come back and live in China, what did your wife think about that?
Initially, she didn't want to, and it was difficult for her because when we came back here in 1819, it was her first time actually going back there on, say, a permanent basis, apart from her holidays for Chinese New Year. And we basically made it a goal to stay for 12 months, if not longer, and go back to Australia to deal with things back there. And when we got back, she landed a really good job. I got a job too, which was in IT, which an area I've been in for a long time and not exactly happy with, but that's what I do back there in Australia. So my wife had a really good job, and she was hesitant about leaving. She felt pregnant, which was fantastic. We've been trying for a long time, and she took maternity leave, and then we, she gave birth to our daughter Millie, and we started to discuss things about, okay, what are we going to do next? And initially she was like, no, I'm not going back to China. No way, I'm staying here. No way. A few things happened. And then just one morning she said, all right, done, let's go. So we sold and packed, and that was it. And
do you know what it was that changed her mind? Because obviously it was something you wanted to do.
Yeah, I do like it here. I mean, granted, the first year that I was here, the first 4 to 6 months was incredibly tough, because I struggled with culture shock and adjusting, and I had to go from being the one who was doing most of the stuff in Australia for us as a married couple, to absolutely nothing, like not being able to do anything. I couldn't speak the language properly. I had to depend on my wife fully. And in Australia, there were a few things that basically rang bells, especially after we had our daughter, and that was the hours that we would have to work, the commute that we would have to undertake to go to and from work, where we lived. Granted, was only 30 kilometers from the city, but each day would be virtually a 3-hour trip added on top of our work day. We would then have to juggle.
Where was that in Australia?
I lived in Brisbane, but I lived on the south side. So
you lived in the Redlands, I think.
Close.
I knew we'd find some commonalities here. This is something we didn't know about, because I had exactly the same situation. I lived in Redland. I lived in Cleveland, and had to travel in and out of Brisbane every day. It was a fair trek.
Yes, and we just weighed everything up, and we thought, you know what, we're not going to get quality time with our daughter. We're going to struggle to get home from work to get her from childcare. We're going to have to fork out childcare fees. We're going to, all of these things. And I mean, granted, that's what people do in Australia. That's what everyone would do in many countries. It's just what you would do. But we had this opportunity to come here, and the in-laws had moved apartment. They had their old apartment, and they said, do you want to live in this one for a while? Come back, bring Millie and spend some time with us. And we just decided, well, yeah, it'll give us quality time with her. And in addition, I landed a job here, which is a fantastic job. I was very fortunate to get it, and it allows us to put our daughter through the school for free. So we save a lot of money too. So it was a no-brainer.
Right. Yeah. So what's the job? Do you want to tell everybody what you're going to do or what you're doing now?
Yeah, I'll be a design teacher for an IB school, an international school here. And it's interesting because outside of Australia, I've always been an English teacher, a language ESL teacher. Yeah, I did my TESOL, everything like that. But this time, I'm actually a design teacher teaching in English in an international school using the IB framework, and I'll be teaching exclusively in English, but it's design, which is something I come from prior to IT. So for me, it's a fantastic fit. I'm really, I'm quite happy with that.
So someone's making a comment here. I think I'll put this one up. It's you only have one, Millie, at the moment. She's 18 months old. Is that right?
A year and a half. And we made the agreement that we're only having the one, so that's it. Okay. One. And luckily the siblings over here, my wife's siblings, have all had kids, so there's no pressure on us to have any more.
Lots of cousins. Brothers and sisters. Yeah, they're all brothers and sisters now. You've got them, don't worry. Do you think that your daughter Millie will get a better education in China than she would have in Australia? I would say it's a different education. Do you think it's better or not better?
I wouldn't necessarily say better or worse. I would say different, as you said. Although, where Millie's concerned, where she'll actually be and where I'll be working, the school works very much like, well, it's an IB school, the same outside of China. So it's essentially a private school, which we wouldn't have been able to afford in Brisbane anyway.
Right.
So in that case, yes, she will get a better education in China in that situation.
So IB is International Baccalaureate. And a lot of people who are listening wouldn't know what that means. And it's not quite the same, but just for a shortened version, if you know the British system is A levels, the Australian system is high school certificate, HSCs, and an American system internationally, they use the IB so that you can get into university. I think that kind of basically covers it. There's a lot more to it, I know, yes, but trying to keep that kind of simple. But you're saying Millie is going into an IB school at 18 months old?
Oh, no, sorry. She's going in at 2.5 years. So not just yet. So we've got a little bit more time, but she will actually be able to go to the school for free. So we don't have to pay anything up until she, from 2.5 to 16, essentially.
Right. Okay. So because you're teaching in that school, she won't have to pay.
Exactly. Otherwise, she would. Yeah.
If you stop teaching, you're going to need to get a job that pays you enough to cover the fees that become necessary. I would suggest. I mean, Hong Long's comment here is that the free education system in China is very different. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. I only know this because of the job I applied for, and it was part of the actual contract. And I questioned them about it. I said, "So, are you saying my daughter will have free education?" They said, "Yes. The only thing you would need to buy is materials here and there." That's it.
If your daughter has a Chinese hukou, then she will get a free education, and basically it's not completely free, but it's pretty much free, close to free. Uniforms and books and some food and transits and things like that get paid for. But the free system is also very, very high pressure as well, I think. So your IB system, if you get her into that school and that's where you stay, that's going to be fantastic. So do you plan to stay? Where are you now? I know you're in Fujian, but whereabouts? What city are you in?
I'm in Fuzhou.
Okay. So I was going to be in Wuyisan this week, but I had to pull out of that because I had a whole heap of other things, which is not that far from you.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So I've heard. I mean, I'm desperate to go there, but it just didn't happen this week. I've got too many other things happening. If you were to just take your daughter to a local school for the next 16 or 18 years, then she would have a lot of pressure, I think.
Yeah, and one other thing I just wanted to add in terms of that, I was informed. Now, I don't know whether this is the case across the board, but because my wife, originally from China, she gave up her Chinese citizenship before she actually met me, and she became an Australian citizen. She lived in Australia for 19 years. So all three of us, myself, my wife, and our daughter, are all Australian citizens. Right. And we were told that we would only be able to put our daughter through an international school program as Australians anyway. So it was something, it was the only real choice we had, and it made sense. We understand, or my wife understands, how much pressure is involved as well, because she's been through the schooling here as well.
Yeah, of course, because she went to university in Australia, didn't she? Friends who are lecturers in Australian university inform me they struggle to mark examination papers. This is in Australia. Kids are unable to write coherently. I find that I've come from 13 years in education as well. I was an IELTS examiner in my last job, but that was a few years ago. And before that, I was an IELTS preparation, university preparation, and university lecturer. I've never taught children, but I've never found this problem. You do get some students who have this issue, but this is not a regular thing to find. Usually Chinese students, when they present their homework or their assignments or their examinations, they're pretty good. Of course, you get the exceptions, but generally speaking, I'd say the kids that I know were pretty good.
I've experienced that as well.
This is something I don't know the answer to. I don't think so. Do you know the answer?
I have no idea. I would need to look that up myself as well. No clue.
So Dazzle Dazzle me with love light. I'm sorry, we can't answer that. I think the answer is no. I think the answer is no, but please don't quote me on that. Research before you quote me. So, what is this one? Is dual citizenship allowed? We're not Australia. Yeah, sorry, it's a completely different topic. Yeah, dual citizenship. They went through a program a little while ago where people who were dual citizens had to stand down, including the leader of one of the parties, I think. Anyway, let's moving back to this. Interestingly, you and your wife are here in China, and my wife is there in Australia right now. She's having a 2.5-month holiday with her parents because she has a sister who lives in Brisbane, in Redcliffe, actually. And yeah, they're currently on a long driving tour. And I spoke to her just before I spoke to you tonight. She's exhausted. They've had 7 days on the road, and they've been through Sydney, Merimbula. They've been to the Great Ocean Road. They've been to Melbourne. They're on Phillip Island at the moment. And one of the problems that she says is she cannot get good Wi-Fi anywhere. And you make the same comment in your tweet, that it's kind of like going back in time. When you leave China, which is supposed to be the underdeveloped country, and you go to one of the most developed countries in the world. Now, you're an IT guy, James. What's gone wrong?
I would just say it's bad policy, and I don't know. It's probably the same case as Australia's been talking for 40 years to get a high-speed rail network, and it still hasn't happened. I mean, they know a lot about it. They've researched everything about it, but never implemented it. But with the internet, they've rolled out the NBN around Australia, and Wi-Fi. Yeah, I mean, whether it be on your mobile phone, you could drive out west of Australia and have no signal. You'd have to fall back to either satellite. I mean, don't quote me on that. I've not spent a lot of time out in the rural areas of Australia, but it's true. And some Wi-Fi can be horrendous. I mean, there's a lot of places still running ADSL, ADSL2 networks, which are horrendous. The NBN network I had prior to leaving was okay, but the internet speed I've got here is phenomenal. I mean, in Brisbane, I was getting 40 megabits per second. Here, I'm getting 200. It's just insane. It's just incredible. I mean, here, I have traveled here in China. I've been to quite a few places, rural areas, and I have had 5G, worst case 4G. And
I have an interesting story about this, because I don't know if you know, you've only kind of we've come across each other on Twitter only recently. I started on Twitter talking about my travels. I cycled across China, and I've done this 4 times now, where I've traveled the length and breadth of China. One of the things that I remember was I was in the desert, camping in the Taklamakan Desert, and it's 180 kilometers to the nearest town, not city, town. And I posted a video on my WeChat Moments, a video from...
You would not get that in Australia.
I mean, my wife can't even... They drove out of Sydney on the way towards Wollongong and lost all signal. And she said, well, it must be just a dead spot. And it was like 40 minutes driving before the signal came back. She was trying to tell me what she'd had for breakfast on WeChat. But there we were in the middle of the Taklamakan Desert, which is, I mean, this is a huge desert in the middle of Xinjiang. And it's like 400 kilometers to travel from Urumqi or Wulumuchi to Hami across this desert. It was one of the routes. We decided to take this route as a kind of adventure. I regretted it, very heavily regretted it. It's like cycling through a hairdryer, really hot wind hitting you all the time. When it's behind you, it's great, but it's difficult. But the signal was working everywhere. This was 2019. The last time we did this was 2019. So it's almost 5 years ago almost 4 years ago that we did this, September 2019, and it worked perfectly well.
Same when I was here in 2018 as well. We traveled to Yunnan and went to some very remote areas there, and we had full signal, and it blew me away because, in Australia, and I even had this conversation with people when I went back to Australia, even fellow IT co-workers or colleagues, and they said, "Oh, well, you know, Australia is a young country. China's much older, and you know, and Australia is very big and vast." And I said, "Well, so is China.
China's a lot bigger."
Technology is pretty much the same worldwide.
Yeah, yeah.
The quality of it.
I think it's a case of. I think really it's a case of investment. Australia is not investing in itself because the return on investment is just not high enough. China does have a lot more people, so if you've got a village with 5,000 people in it, then you're going to need to take signals there, and it's as simple as that. I think. Yeah. So it's a very interesting thing. Let's move back to my questions that I have here. The IT one was a question. You made a comment about Chinese people being free and Australian people less so. And I'd like to explore that and expand on it because I've said the same thing myself. We have more personal freedoms here than anyone can absolutely imagine. Can you give me an example of what you mean when you said that?
Yes. You know, I get the typical, yeah, it's a surveillance state here. No one can do what they want. No one's free. But I see, even I feel that I've got more freedom here myself. But granted, I'm a Westerner, and we do get treated somewhat differently, I admit.
True, yeah.
However, I have seen, met, and know a lot of Chinese people who live just the same, if not more free than back in Australia. And an example I'll use is here. Here in Fuzhou, we have the West Lake, Shihu, which I frequent a lot. And every time I go there, no matter what time of the day it is, there are people singing, dancing, exercising, and they're just doing everything that they want. And they're singing at the top of their lungs with little radios attached, playing their music, and they're singing opera or they're playing all their instruments. Some sound really great, some don't sound that great at all, but nobody judges them. Now, if that were to happen in Queen Street Mall in Brisbane, everybody would point the finger and look and go, "Oh, look at that idiot. Oh my God," you know. Yeah. So there's this lack of freedom there already with judgment from other people on a social level. And here we have the cameras everywhere, and in Australia we have cameras everywhere. In Australia they have facial recognition. In China they have facial recognition, but it's just not as obvious in Australia, but it's used. Yeah. I can tell you that it's used.
Okay, you know something about that.
Yeah, it's used, and it's used heavily in Australia, and people seem to think that it's not. And I was having a chat with a local Chinese man here who dealt with CCTV and things like that. And he said that a lot of the CCTV is there for safety. Crime rates have dropped and plummeted. And I mean, crime rates in China are very low. Crime rates in Australia, as much as people would hate to admit it, are on the rise. And here the cameras are for safety. He said, you imagine walking through the park at night and you walk through the gates, the camera sees your face, registers your face, and you don't get home and someone wonders where you are, they'll find you.
Yeah. I feel the same way. It's more about a personal perception. How do we feel about this? If we feel that this is an encroachment on our privacy, then we feel uncomfortable about it. But if we feel that this is designed for our safety, then we feel better about it. And I think my personal opinion is this is a lot more about how much you trust your government than about what's happening here. Because the situation, the scenario is exactly the same. Australia, I was there last time was 2019, just before COVID. I was back in the UK, same year, 2019. There are cameras everywhere. There's not much difference to here. But the difference is I trust the Chinese government not to abuse this. And do I trust the British government or the Australian government? I'm not saying I distrust them. I'm just saying that there is no lack of trust. I actually do trust the British government and the Australian government, but a lot of people don't. But there's a lack of trust in those two countries where I've lived, whereby there's not here. The people here tend to say, well, the government's looking after me.
and they genuinely feel that, and they it's not like they're being brainwashed to believe that either. I mean, they're happy with their government, and that's more than can be said for the government back in Australia. You get these prime ministers that come in and they make all these promises, and the two-party preferred system, and they make all these promises, and then they get elected and they go through their term and nothing, you know, no promises are delivered, and then another one comes and another one comes. They go through more prime ministers than underwear. And I just, that's how I feel. And here, sure, you have the government that is the way it is, but it's a very different government. It runs very differently, and it doesn't mean it's bad. It's just different, and people are happy. And at the end of the day, if the people are happy, then it's working.
Yeah, I think there's a great thing to be said for that. And we know when international bodies come to China and ask Chinese people, are you happy with your government? They do surveys. The response that they get is always positive. Chinese people feel there is more democracy. Chinese people are the happiest in the world, according to the Ipsos thing. The Chinese democracy, China feels it is more democratic than America feels they are democratic. These are international surveys. Then, of course, you get these people who say, well, it's no good asking Chinese people because they're afraid to give you the proper answer. Exactly. Afraid of what? Afraid of what? Exactly. I just can't get it. These people have never been here and don't understand that. You've said the same thing to me. The view of this authoritarian government that people have is a completely misunderstood view. There are a lot of police. Have you ever had encounters with the police in China?
I actually have, and they've always been positive, and I've had a laugh with them. They are out, they are about, but I've never seen them abusing their power. I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I mean, it happens everywhere. But in Australia, I mean, you see videos of horrendous police brutality and other countries as well. But the police here, I see them everywhere. They're out on the streets helping people cross the road. They're out patrolling, and every encounter I've had with the police has been exceptional. And they've even tried to talk to me, and they've been really excited that I tried to speak Chinese and I could sit and have a beer with them. It's incredible.
Yeah. Actually, that's true. I've actually had a beer with Chinese too. When we were traveling through Xinjiang on our bikes, I mean, this is a place, Xinjiang, supposedly the most authoritarian corner of the world that exists, apart from perhaps Ukraine right now. But Xinjiang, we travel through there, and yes, there is an enhanced security there. But when you arrive in a town, you have to go through a checkpoint to get into the town. There's no way to get into, no roads into the town without going through a police checkpoint. You must go through. Everybody has to get out of the car. They don't actually swipe their cards. They present their cards. Face gets recognized, and through they go. It takes 2 minutes, 3 minutes, no more than that. And it's never longer than that. And literally is, they're seconds. And occasionally when there's a lot of people, it'd be 2 or 3 minutes. But for us, we had to do the manual stuff because we have passports. And so it would take us 10 or 15 minutes. But they always came out giving us, here's some water for you, and here's some fruit for you, and having a great chat with us. And what are you doing? You know, why are you on bikes? Can't you afford train tickets or stuff like that? So we got great reception from. But I have to be honest, when we cycled out of Xinjiang, we sort of went, we don't have to do that anymore. The rest of China is completely free. But even though we had to do it, the inconvenience of it, that's all it was. Because when you've got 100 kilometers to do in a day, and you have to stop at each town on the way or each village on the way to register, you lose 3 or 4 hours. You don't quite make your daily distances in the same way that you do in other provinces or regions. So that's the reason. That's the reason I didn't like it. It wasn't because of they're authoritarian. It was because it was delaying us. We couldn't get our mileage up. You travel 20 kilometers and then stop for a police check, 20 minutes lost, and a little bit more because half the time, can we have photographs with you? I'm in police photograph books or phones. The foreigner came through on their bikes. Great.
I think like the actual security is tight there due to the previous issues with terrorism, I believe.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. Oh, this is a question for. Sorry, I thought this was a question for us from Trevor Norman. It's a question to Trevor Norman. So I don't think I'll answer that question. 很多人讲我不会说中文，我不知道为什么，他们不认识我。So many people think I can't speak Chinese, but I don't know why, because they don't know me. They just think I can't speak Chinese. I get this all the time on Twitter. But you can't even speak Chinese. Why do you say that? You don't know me.
Exactly. And why are you saying that about China? You don't know China. It's the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's true. Yeah, it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. Now, there's another question that I had. I think we kind of covered most of the stuff that I had in my question list, which is great. But you mentioned to me that you, and I hope you don't mind me saying this because this wasn't in your tweet, that you feel you have some kind of a calling to write or make videos about China.
Yes.
Why do you feel that?
I think it ties into what we were saying before when you asked about why I felt I had a love for China from a young age, which I did. And as I became an adult, and especially after I visited here for the first time, which was 2015, I might add. That wasn't when we moved here for the year, but we came here. I came here for a wedding. And that was the first time I experienced China. And I had a lot of mixed feelings before coming here. Granted, I had a lot of misconceptions, and they were all blown to pieces. And that was the start of my journey. And I have no problem admitting it. I love this place. I love China. It is a beautiful place. And I feel it's horrendously misrepresented. And it's not just because I have a Chinese-born wife. I have Chinese family who have taken me in as a son and treat me as such. And I love them as such. I have a wide network of Chinese friends who have been there for me when I've needed them the most. And I can't even speak Chinese properly. And I find that phenomenal. And I just feel that China is misrepresented. I live here. I feel China is my second home. I'm going to be living here for a long time. And I just feel in my heart that I need to write about it, write about my experiences, write how I feel. Despite what others might think of me, I couldn't care less. I just want to get the story out there, and I want to tell my stories. I want to show people the China that I see and the China that a lot of people don't get to see or even understand outside of the borders.
Yeah, I felt the same. How long did it take you to realize, when you arrived in China, how long did it take you to realize that you had been misinformed?
8 months.
It's strange. It took 8 months. It took me about 4 years or 5 years. I think 8 months is pretty good.
That's when we were here in 18. So there was 2015 and all of the trips that we came every year. And granted, sometimes we were here for 2 months, sometimes 3 months at a time for Chinese New Year. So I took extended leave and was here. So there was a lot more time added on to that as well from 2015 to 2018. But when we were here in 2018, it took a majority of the year. I'd say 8 months. Can I put an exact date on it? No. But I left China feeling like, and when I got back to Australia, I thought, oh, yeah, it's good to be back, familiar territory, cafes here, I can do this and I can do that. But I started to then, the scales turned. So when I was in China, especially for the first period, I was comparing China with Australia and saying, oh, I don't like this, oh, I prefer this, or I don't like this, I prefer this, because completely different countries, different way of life, different people.
Yep.
Everything's different. But when I went back to Australia after 2019, and especially the pandemic happened, I started to realize that I missed a lot of what I was experiencing or what I experienced in China, convenience, and many other things, friends, food, the language. And then I started to feel that I preferred China over Australia. It was a very weird sensation.
It is, isn't it? Yes. Yeah.
Very, very strange. And then when I came back here, now I've come back and China has advanced so much in 5 years, I cannot even describe it. The Fuzhou especially now has a metro. Their metro was not even complete when I was here last. And there's just so much change. There's cafes popping up everywhere, and they're not rubbish cafes either. They're excellent cafes, and they're everywhere.
Yeah, coffee seems to be the new culture here. There's a little debate going on here about whether I can speak Cantonese, Mandarin. I only speak a little Putonghua. I get by. Guangdong, Sek Teng Susu. So if anybody can speak Cantonese, all I just said there was, I don't speak Cantonese, but I understand quite a lot. My wife is a Cantonese person, and she and her family speak Cantonese around me. So that answers the question. I can speak. I am functional in Chinese. I'm definitely not fluent. I'm long, long way from fluent, but I'm functional. I get by. My wife's away for 2.5 months. I have to get by. I traveled across China with an Irish guy, 2 of us, 2 foreigners together with no translator. We have to get by. So yeah, I've got enough. But in terms of Cantonese, no. So I hope that answers the question, to get that one out of the way. And someone said I've lived here for more than a decade. In a few months' time, I will have lived here for 2 decades. So we're getting close to. I arrived here in 2004, so I'm in my 19th year now. Yeah.
2004 was when my wife arrived in Australia.
There you go. I bet her English is a lot better than my Chinese. The answer to this one, traveler, is no. Jerry is not as good as Kevin Rudd. However, I have caught Kevin Rudd out in a couple of mistakes. He said on an interview just a few days ago, or a couple of weeks ago now, that they call Xi Jinping Xi Dada, which means Uncle Xi. It doesn't. It means father. So I would have thought that he would get something like that right. He's not Uncle Xi. It would be Xi Shushu if he was Uncle Xi, but he's Xi Dada, which means he's the father of our country at the moment. Our country. I'm allowed to say that. Yeah. You said you've done some traveling. What about this one? What's the progress of rural regions? You came here and then you left and then you came back. Did you notice? You noticed changes in Fuzhou. I know that. But what about rural China?
That too. I've seen, well, I mean, that's been steadily the same, but it has been getting better. A lot of the country towns, or Laojia, especially my wife's hometown, they're building new buildings. It's improving. I mean, the last time I was in her hometown, there were sections that were just empty, old derelict buildings that have been left there to fall apart, which is part of the family's heritage, from what I understand. But there's a lot more development going on in the rural areas as well. Not to mention the train network here, the high-speed rail network here is just improving so fast, and the infrastructure in terms of road for, car and bus transport, truck transport is incredible. The roads are just linking everywhere, so everyone can get everywhere and go everywhere. But I've not seen a huge difference with the rural areas in terms of the cities. Of course, the cities are going to develop and move and change a lot quicker. But as the cities are skyrocketing, you're just zooming away, it's pulling, all of the rural areas are coming with it, in my mind.
I'd agree with that. I've spent a lot of time. I think I'm quite lucky. Some people who are vloggers on YouTube get taken to places that are really fantastic. They get the best food, best hotels. They get shown into these, they get free into the 5-star, 5A rated events and activities. I don't. I get taken to poverty alleviation schemes, and I get taken to things like democratic meetings in a village town hall and stuff like that. And people look at that and say, God, that's pretty boring. Not to me. It's totally fascinating. And I've also been involved with charity for a long time. Accidentally, we became accidental fundraisers. In 2005, we had a Christmas party and raised some money that we donated. we didn't plan to make money, but we wanted, it got too big to really handle. And, 120 people were coming to this planned party for half a dozen of us. It just got bigger and bigger. So I said, well, we're going to start charging people. We'll get some food in, and people can pay their way, and then if we make a profit, we'll donate it. So we made a profit. This was 2005. We made a 10,000 RMB profit, and then we donated that to the youth association, and then got taken to the places where they used the money. So we went out on a bus trip for 3 days into Guangxi, and also in a couple of other regions in the different parts of Guangdong. And I saw poverty, absolutely abject poverty. It just is unbelievable. You see these kind of African villages. This was them. They had huts with compacted floors and chickens inside of their huts with a fireplace in the middle, lovely meats hanging from the fireplace. Best meat you ever tasted in your life. It's absolutely delicious. And then we got into this and we started raising money. And then I found we don't need to raise money for charity anymore. So now we've kind of refocused and we raise money for disabled people. We help disabled people assimilate into the community now. And that's why I rode a bike from the border of Macau to the border of Kazakhstan just to raise money for charity, also because I wanted to see China. But I raised, I think, about $250,000 RMB that trip. My wife the following year walked to Beijing, from here to Beijing, 4.5 months. Yeah, I know. She said, I wanted to go one better than my husband. And then together we flew to Urumqi with bikes and cycled back to raise money for charity. And I found that there is no need anymore for that charitable donation to go into rural China, because everything is changing. I mean, there may be some circumstances where this person has hit on some bad luck and someone's been in hospital, bad burns or something like that. It would help that person. But generally speaking, now we just focus on disabilities, people who have disabilities, and getting them the facilities that they need in order to live a normal life. And it actually really does quite well. But the rural revitalization and the poverty alleviation schemes are so damn good that people in the West can't conceive this. They haven't just lifted people out of poverty. They've given people a future. Millions of people have a future now that they didn't have before. So I think that was a great question to ask. And you can't say that this is a bad country to live in when they do that. People don't have any concept of what 800 million lifted out of poverty actually means. I do, because I've seen poverty in its worst. And I've been through cities 5 years after I've been through, or towns after I've been through them before, and they're in entirely different places. That's what poverty alleviation is doing. So someone's put a comment about here we go. Rural China's. This is part of your IT thing. The idea of taking IT and the unsung heroes, I think, of poverty alleviation are the express delivery people.
Oh, it's
thousands, hundreds, millions of people work in express delivery now, and they're selling stuff on a farm we bought some Hami melon in Hami from the side of the road. And while we were there, my wife ordered some to be sent to her father in Guangdong. 36 hours later, they were enjoying fresh Hami melon straight out of the field, onto the truck, down to Guangdong. Wow.
It's incredible. I mean, I know I've not witnessed a lot of it myself, but I know from an IT standpoint, and the automation here is incredible. The automation for deliveries, food. I mean, I use online applications to order food, groceries, and things like that. And the actual groceries we receive are fresher than what we would be getting at Woolworths in Australia. It's just insane. Right. It's incredible.
It takes 3 days to get them from the field into the shopping, and it takes you 24 hours to get them from the field into your fridge on this system. Yeah.
And food delivery here, not just restaurant delivery, like takeaway or food delivery or anything like that. Groceries are at our door within 30 minutes. Within 30 minutes, and we have never had a problem with any of the, the fruit and vegetables. It's been incredible.
We had a situation here in Zhongshan a while ago where we ordered some food. It was just at the end of COVID, in the last few days back in December, and we ordered some food, and we waited ages, and it didn't come. Something has gone wrong. It didn't come, and then my wife got a phone call, and it was from the guy in the shop, and he said, I've got a record of your food being picked up, but I don't have a record of who picked it up or whether they delivered it. Have you seen has your food arrived? And she said, no, it hasn't. Oh, I'm so sorry about this. This is the second time this week this has happened. And it turns out that some of the delivery drivers were actually stealing the food. And the reason turned out was that one of the delivery companies wasn't paying them properly. So we got our food delivered free of charge again. It was reordered and delivered, and there was no extra cost. And I said to Anne, while we're eating it, Anne's my wife, while we're eating it, I said, maybe we should contact the shop and pay for the second one as a kind of pay it forward thing, because COVID is actually quite good to me, believe it or not. I actually made money during COVID, more money than I would have done if COVID hadn't have happened. So let's do a pay it back. So she contacted the guy and said, can we pay for these? Because if that guy stole them, it's because they needed it more than we did, and we can afford to pay for it. And the guy said, no, there's no need. I've done the same thing myself. I've covered it. Don't worry about it. So it looks like a lot of people were paying stuff forward. And I think that was the good thing that I found about China. Here, back to another point, social media. Social media comes from the internet. Social media and the SF Express and the ZTO Express. This is it. They're selling stuff live. Have you done that? Have you bought anything live from the farm rather than from the supermarket?
I haven't yet, but I've seen it. I am on Douyin quite frequently now. I wasn't to begin with because I didn't like just spending ages scrolling through, and I'm the same with Facebook, I might add, or Instagram in the West. But I've seen it now, and I know people that are doing it, and I think it's fantastic because you can actually see the products, order and buy direct.
This is an interesting one. How you've been in Australia more recently than me. Do you think poverty is rising in Australia or remaining the same or decreasing? What do you think?
It's a tough call. I'm not too sure about Australia. I think the standard of living might be decreasing because people are busier. There's problems with the interest rates and everything like that. I do know that there are other nations like the United States and things like that do seem to be going backward, and poverty is increasing. There is a large homeless problem in Brisbane, a homelessness and drug problem in Brisbane,
really?
and in Australia as well. Most people would just see that as the norm, though, because that's all people have seen. Whereas here in China, I find it very different. But I can't say for sure about Australia having.
You sold your house in Australia, didn't you?
No.
Oh, right. Okay. I sold out a long time ago, but my daughter is in the housing market in Australia. It's pretty tough.
Yes, it is. We're discussing getting rid of it because being here now and looking at where things are moving, we don't feel that we would have been able to have kept the house if we'd have remained in Australia, and that's that's a sad thing. I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah, my daughter's okay. She can she's got an apartment and she's okay. She can manage it, but her mortgage rate has increased, I think, 11 times in 12 months, maybe 12 times now. And that's a big problem. It's gone from $800 to $1,500 a month, $800 a month to $1,500 a month. And mean, it's a tough call when she's single and living on her own. It's a tough call to keep that one going.
Yeah.
Terrible housing. I'm not sure that it's a housing problem. I think it's a thing that could seriously become a housing problem. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yeah, if nothing is done, they're talking about bringing in more migrants, and I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem. I think Australia needs more people, but it also needs more resources for those people before you bring them in. It's not just in Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's not just in Hollywood. San Francisco and Philadelphia, I believe, have the worst homelessness problem, and this is the problem. It is on the rise, whereas here in China, it's the opposite. I was in Guangzhou last week, and I saw a couple of beggars. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen beggars in years. In Zhongshan, where I live, I haven't seen a beggar for years. But I saw a couple in Zhongshan just a couple of days ago. That was the first for me. So I'm hoping that was just kind of where I was, or maybe it's not a big problem. I did walk around. I walked probably about 10 kilometers in 3 evenings that I was staying. I went for a walk each night, and I saw 2 or 3 beggars, but it was only one spot where there was on either side of the footpath. Couldn't walk through without passing them. But no one has cash now. How do you pay a beggar in China?
Yeah. Oh dear, it's cashless, and I know I've got friends in Australia who are not sure about that either. They keep talking to me. Oh, it's cashless, you know, the social credit system, and if you do the wrong thing, you're going to lose. You know, you're going to be frozen. You're not going to be able to have any money. You'll be homeless. It's like, no, well, actually, it's the opposite here. From everything I've seen, it's the opposite here. None of my family have any problem with any social credit system.
Do you know your family's social credit score?
No.
Have you ever asked them?
From what I understand, it's only used for companies, corporations, and corruption and things like that. I mean,
yeah, there's actually no. I did make a video about it a few months ago. There's not one thing called a social credit score. No. Someone says beggars accept QR code. They have their own QR codes by WeChat. Yeah, the social credit system. You can go to the bank and get a printout of your credit score. That one is true. You can. And if you are subject to a court order, then you can have your money frozen until you have resolved the court issue. I don't think that's much different to the West. If you protest in China, I've never ever heard of anybody protesting and having their funds frozen, but that did happen in Canada just recently. The other thing in the UK was that 52 people got arrested for committing no crime whatsoever in London because it was thought they might commit crimes. So, you know, which of us is the authoritarian? Well, this was the king's coronation. 52 people got arrested before the coronation because it was assumed that they planned to disrupt the coronation. Well, maybe they were planning to disrupt the coronation, but you know, there are laws and you can't arrest someone. I was a police officer for 10 years. I know this for a fact. You can't arrest someone for thinking about breaking the law. Now, there is conspiracy to break the law. Yes, you can arrest them for that. But protesting doesn't come under, you know, conspiracy to commit crime, conspiracy to commit murder. You know, these are very serious offenses. And if you conspire to do them, then you have to have evidence to suggest that you were conspiring to do them. You know, you go out and buy a gun, or you go out and buy a knife and you're planning on killing someone, you're stalking them. There's a conspiracy if there's more than one of you doing it. But conspiracy to protest doesn't exist, or didn't exist when I was a police officer in London. So there's a big problem.
It's almost as if,
go on.
Oh, it's almost as if some Western nations are actually looking at China and making up these stories in order to implement these laws and things in the West, saying, looking at China and saying, oh, we're using China as an example here. It's like, well, actually, just a thought.
Yeah. Well, people protested here during COVID back in December. There were protests. The only people I've heard of who were arrested were a bunch of Hong Kongers who deliberately came here to protest. I haven't heard of anyone else. I don't know anyone who protested. And of course, one guy from the BBC was arrested as well. Can't remember his name, but one of the BBC journalists in Shanghai. Now, here's an interesting thing. These protests were very, very isolated, and every single one of them seemed to have a camera crew there. So how does that happen? You know, organic protests with a camera crew, from an international camera crew turning up. Do you get this one? Do you understand what this is about? I wonder if Yellen has a QR code.
Not sure what Yellen is. Can you
Janet
elaborate?
Yellen is the Secretary of the Treasury of the United States. She's coming here in 2 days' time for a 3-day visit, and she plans to come with her cap in her hand, or a begging bowl, perhaps, asking China to please stop selling US debt and start rebuying US debt. So if she's got a QR code, they can help her out. These are the ones that got arrested in Guangzhou. There was a bunch of Hong Kongers got arrested in Guangzhou, and it turns out they were arrested because there was a money trail, and a money trail into their bank accounts. So yeah, the Chinese police, they may not be authoritarian, but they're pretty efficient when they want to be. And I think they were, there was a bunch of people, it was really interesting, a whole bunch of people who arrived in a place called Haiju Square for a protest. But Haiju Square is not where they should have been protesting. There's a suburb called Haiju where there was lockdowns and people were upset and angry. So they actually went to the wrong place, and they were protesting free Haiju, in English, free Haiju. And of course, they're in Haiju Square, which is like 12 kilometers away. They're in the wrong place. which indicates, and of course, because they all speak Cantonese, it indicates that they weren't locals.
Wow.
I don't know about this one. Do you have a comment on this? Nigel Farage's punishment? I have no idea what that means.
No.
No.
Not sure. Nigel Farage.
No. Okay. So, yeah, this is an interesting one. We're getting a little political here about Hong Kong, and this is maybe outside of your area of expertise, but I'm thinking about doing something about this, but I thought about doing something about this, but I decided not to. About a year ago, or maybe even more, I did a video about Hong Kong's national security law, and I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Hong Kong's national security law, they've just issued arrest warrants for 8 people who are not in Hong Kong, and that's it. So let's have a look. This is another thing. This has just happened today, imposing restrictions on rare metals to the US. Fair enough. If the US wants to sanction China, then China has the right to sanction back.
Exactly. But then they throw a hissy fit when it's done.
Yeah, I think the next thing I was going to ask you, and this is actually coming down to my last question. We're over the hour, and I said we'll try and finish within 90 minutes. You said that you plan on doing some videos. You only have a couple up already, and you want to do some writing. Where can people find you? I know you're on Twitter. I'm going to put your Twitter name here. It's the Commie Pommy, isn't it?
I think Twitter is Commie Pommy, and YouTube is the same. I have a couple of videos on YouTube, and it's essentially just all I've done at the moment is just done some walking tours in some of the sites here in Fuzhou, and briefly discuss the history. I also enjoy writing, and that can be found at the moment on Twitter. I did pay for the blue tick on Twitter purely because I wanted to write stuff. Everyone uses Twitter to write very short things, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to be a bit different here, and I'm just going to write something. And if someone says, oh, stop writing something so long, stick it on a blog or whatever. I mean, I have a blog, but I no longer use it. I find myself on Twitter more often than not. Right. I was thinking about going on Medium and chucking some of my my stories on there, but as it stands, mainly at the moment, Twitter, YouTube, And as I said, I do have a blog, which is hellofujian.com. And there's only a few stories on there at the moment. It's relatively new, as is my my YouTube channel.
Okay, let's put this one up, hellofujian.com.
And the idea around that originally was when I first came here, I thought to myself, I'll create a blog and I'll just focus on what to do and what to see in Fujian, my experiences or stories of Fujian. If I focus too big, it's going to be impossible because China is humongously large. It's a huge country, and there's just too much to do, essentially.
Yeah. I agree. There's a lot to do in China. Now, you mentioned Medium there. I'm still on Medium, but I've stopped adding to Medium. When I do a video, I always put the script, or have always put the script onto Medium. And the other day I got suspended for 24 hours. Now, being suspended is not a surprise because I'm off narrative. You know, I'm usually anti the main narrative. And so that didn't really surprise me very much that I finally got suspended. I was back on 24 hours later, and I got a very curt message. I applied to find out what was going on, and it's called trust@medium.com or something like that. And so I wrote to them saying, what's the story? And I got an email back saying, we're looking into it. Okay. Next day I was back online and I got an email from them which just said, it seems one of your articles, and they didn't say which one, got caught in our spam filter. You are now reactivated. That was it. So which article? What did I do that was wrong that got caught up? And how about an apology, or at least some kind of reasoning for this? You know, it really was. It was kind of rude of them. I know it's all automated, but when you do suspend someone, you should really let them know what you've suspended them for. So that turned me off. So I opened a Substack, and now I'm going to be posting my stuff on Substack, maybe as well. But we'll see how the timing goes, because it's actually it's kind of time consuming. Every time I put a video up, having to put the words up as well, doing it in two different places, because the words don't take the photographs. You've got to cut and paste things. I'm always editing as well. It does. It does. Yeah.
But yeah. I enjoy writing, and I've only just started to do videos, so it's new to me. I'm not used to being on this side of the lens, per se. I'm an amateur photographer as well. I like to be out with my camera and be behind it. So it's unfamiliar territory for me to be the other way around.
I felt the same when I first started this. Actually, I used to wait until when I was doing one of my videos. I used a script, a teleprompter and stuff like that. And I used to wait until my wife went out before I did it because I was so self-conscious about doing it. Now I just say, hey, I'm going to go on live. I'm going to make a video. And she says, okay, I'll shut up. So she just sits there and reads a book until I'm finished. Usually it doesn't take very long. But I did feel very self-conscious. I'm like you. I think we both have a lot in common. I'm very similar to you in this. I feel uncomfortable in front of the camera. I feel a lot better behind it. I'm okay doing this kind of thing, but I do feel uncomfortable when I'm in front of the camera having to say stuff.
I think that comes from the fact that if I were to do that in Brisbane, and I had my gimbal thingy and had my phone and I was talking in it and doing this and that, everyone would be looking at me in terms of what the heck is that idiot doing? Or And here I've noticed that people just do it, and hence why I said the freedom thing. I mean, I see them walking on the street talking in a camera, and they've got this massive rig around their waist and the camera up here, and they're going and doing their thing. And I think nobody cares. Nobody's looking at them, so why not? Why not? Why can't I do that? So
exactly, yeah. I don't do much outside. I did when I first started. I would take my camera outside and put it into a park. But I found, you might be, you're just in the middle of a you're not live. I wasn't live streaming, but just in the middle of recording an interview, and then suddenly a head comes in. Huh? Some uncle or auntie, curious, just wondering what you're doing, or walking past you, and they walk past and they go.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's happened to me too.
So I stopped doing the park thing. The other thing was the crickets were just too damn loud. We got a lot of crickets. So, and my other problem is I can't walk and talk because I'm going to trip over something. I'm very, I'm great on bikes, but I'm clumsy on my feet. So I have trouble walking and talking.
I think your trip through China on a bike would have been phenomenal.
Going to do it again.
Oh, wow.
In September, we're heading down to Hainan. We're going to ride down to Hainan, and we're helping Hainan TV make a video. They've just constructed a path all the way around the island, and they want to make a video with a couple of cyclists.
Oh,
and
wow.
they've asked if we'll go down there for a few days to help them do that. And they're going to pay me, I think, I'm not sure if they're paying both of us or paying each of us. I'm not sure, but we're going to get $1,000 US, which is like 7,000 RMB for 12 days work. It's really, we're not doing this for the money, that's for sure, but the experience, and they'll cover all the costs, so that'll be great. But riding in China, you know, it's awesome, but then there are days you just look at, you know, what the hell am I doing here? You're pushing up a mountain in freezing cold, it's snowing, and it's not easy. But it's great. It's a great achievement to have under your belt and say, I've done that. And people say, well, where did you ride before you came to China? No, I rode to school as a kid. That was it. Yeah.
Well, I did some cycling in Australia, and the majority of it was connected to Oahu in my lounge room. So I was cycling virtually most of the time. It's not entirely bike friendly in Brisbane. I mean, some might argue that, but for me, it didn't feel like it was bike friendly. But I would love to do something like that here too. That'd be fun.
Right. China's actually surprisingly bike friendly. I mean, in the cities, you have bike tracks all over the place. When you get out of the cities, I saw somebody here who is from Nanning, and Guangxi has fantastic. We spent 7 weeks cycling around Guangxi in during COVID, 2020, I think it was, 2021. During COVID, we spent 7 weeks. My wife and I left here, rode to Guangxi, spent 7 weeks on the road, so about 5 weeks in Guangxi. And the cycle tracks there are amazing and really, really good. And we got up, we didn't get to Nanning because we turned right at Yuling and headed up to Guilin and spent some time around Yangshuo and places like that. But we got up into the mountains just before you get into Guizhou, around the rice terraces, and we spent a few days there. That was fantastic. Wow. That was an awesome place. Yeah, there it is. I think this is the guy, Anthony Roche. You're in Nanning, right? And you really are lucky if you want to ride a bike around Nanning and Guangxi. And also, sorry, I didn't mean to hit on that one. I was just trying to remove the last one. Also, it's quite flat. Now, people don't realize this, but Guangxi, with all those mountains, it's quite flat to ride around because the roads go around them. But to get into Guangxi from Guangdong, you go across the Nanling Mountains, and they are beautiful, really beautiful. Yeah. So
I can only imagine.
Well, get on your bike and do it.
I think I will. I mean, the first time I ever cycled outside of Australia was actually in Hong Kong.
Right.
I visited Hong Kong and I cycled for 6.5 hours over and across and around the island.
Yeah.
And
I don't think I'd do Hong Kong. I think that would be more dangerous than China for me.
It was amazing because I actually felt safer on the road there than I did in Brisbane. And that was a very weird sensation. It's as if the people in Hong Kong, and I'm assuming most of China too, like you could probably answer that, but I felt that they were more aware of cyclists on the road than people in Brisbane were.
Yeah, you get a lot of people beep you, and at first that's kind of disturbing. You know, you kind of turn around and say, shut the fuck up. But more often than not, they're just letting you know they're there. They beep you just to say, don't do anything stupid, I'm passing you. And this one, if anybody has an interest, Catherine's Journey to the East. She is wonderful. I follow Catherine. We've never spoken, never met, but she rides a lot around China, and really, she's a great person to follow. So Catherine's Journey to the East is well worth a follow. Wow. There's a few people who do it. I'm not alone. I'm not unique. There's a lady called Marion Rosenberg from Hainan. She does 2 months every year traveling around, and she writes on a blog called crazyguyonabike.com. And she's worth a follow as well. She's been to some interesting places, but she hasn't yet been to Xinjiang. I don't know if there's that many people have ridden to the border of Kazakhstan. That's a bit interesting. You know, you go into Inner Mongolia through Ningxia, through Gansu. It's quite interesting. You don't have to go to Inner Mongolia. We chose to. It was kind of take the long way to Xinjiang. It's nice.
Xinjiang is actually next on my list. It's somewhere I've always wanted to be. I mean, I've been that way and up the coast, but I haven't been up to Xinjiang or anywhere up that way yet.
I've been to Xinjiang, I think, 5 times now, and twice on bikes. Once to Xinjiang and once from Xinjiang, and probably I've done about 5,000 kilometers inside Xinjiang. Going to the border of Kazakhstan, you have to go across the Tian Shan Mountains. Oh, it's awesome. It really is. It's such a diverse area. And you've got huge grasslands. You've got the cotton farms, miles and miles and miles of cotton farms, and no slave labor picking them. Not in that area anyway, because it's just so big, it has to be machine operated. You literally need the population of China to go up there for a couple of weeks to pick it. It's that big. So you get across there. You've got the deserts. You've got several deserts. You're not just one desert. You've got the Tengeli Desert, which is around Gansu, Ningxia borderland. You've got the Gobi Desert, and you've got the Taklamakan. It really is. It's a great place. Fantastic place. And then you've got mountains, grasslands, deserts, snow. You got it all. Lakes, beautiful lakes. Go there. No, I have not been to Wudong Mountain. Somebody's asked that question. Have you been to Wudong Mountain? Have you been there?
No.
Not yet. So talking of cotton, Flew, hand picking. The only cotton that is hand picked now is something called, I think it's called a long. It's not long grain. It has it's a longer strain of cotton, and it's hand picked because it's a much higher quality cotton, and it is very well paid. Yeah. Oh, very well paid. I understand. I've never done it. Yes, someone's just mentioning you're living in Fujian. Were you aware that Xi Jinping was the governor of Fujian once upon a time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I was.
Good. Okay. Well, so we've already put up where people can find you, your videos and your writing, which are not very prolific at the moment, but you are going to pick that up, right?
Oh, most certainly.
Yeah. Okay. So the Commie Pommy on Twitter, the Commie Pommy on YouTube, and hellofujian.com online. They're all you, right?
Yep.
Is there anywhere else they can find you?
Not just yet. I don't really use Facebook or Instagram at the moment.
Right. Neither do I.
So mainly those platforms at the moment. But when things do change, and I'm sure they will, I'll be putting it on there as well. On Twitter, let everyone know. And
this is a great point, Glumar. Don't forget to push the like button, everybody, if you like it, because that gets us out to the wider world. The more likes you get, the more YouTube focuses on putting you out there. Thank you very much for suggesting that. So yeah, someone said Egyptian cotton. This is the one. It's the Egyptian cotton. It's also in certain parts of America you can get it. And it's 20% of the world. Xinjiang is a huge producer of it. It's the top quality. You know, when you go into a hotel and the hotel sheets are really nice, that's what we're talking about here. And that cotton. So okay, Anything else that you'd like to add, James, before we go off the end of the broadcast?
I would like to thank everyone that took the time to comment and like and show an interest in my tweets. I started that not by wanting to get a lot of attention. I just wanted to share my stories, and I feel it's almost meditative to type and write stuff like that. So I just thought, well, why not let the world know? So I did it, and I had no idea that that particular tweet, I had no idea would be as popular as it has been, and I'm very grateful for everyone at least taking the time to read it and show an interest in that as well.
Well, I bookmarked it, and I'm going to be sending it to anyone who challenges me. And read this bloke; it's not me. I like to have other people who've been through what I've been through and understand it. So, I mean, I thank you for writing that tweet. And basically, I knew you were there, but you drew attention to yourself there. I mean, you do attract attention with the name Commie Pommy, but this one really did help. And you're going to get accused of by some people. I mean, it already happened today. Did you see one guy accused us both? Don't listen to those white guys. They're paid by the CCP. Did you see that one?
Yes. And I mean, I read them all. I see them all, and honestly, I don't mind. And the reason I don't mind is because everyone has a right to have their own opinion. It's just they need to be more informed, I guess. But overall, the result, the feedback overall has been positive. And to be honest, I don't mind about the negative comments. And they're going to happen no matter what you do.
That's true. That's true. You could say whatever you like, and someone will be against you. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, James, thank you very much for joining me. And we got up to 150 viewers there, which is amazing, I think.
Fantastic.
I've lost my mouse. Something has gone wrong there. I've got it back. I'm going to say good night to everybody, but thank you very much, everyone, for joining. We got up to 150 views, which is really good for this. So obviously, it proves something that, James, you're more popular than Jerry. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for having me, Jerry, and thank you everyone for watching. I do appreciate it.